Hey, how are we going to scam a free ride today?
My husband had invited me to a fancy steak dinner, and that's when we were out enjoying our meal. While I was in the restroom, I happened to overhear a conversation from my eldest son and his wife. It seemed impossible that they would be at this restaurant, and I reached for the door to ask how they got in. Listening to their conversation, I was speechless. "If we do this, you won't be able to see your son and his wife for a while." I promptly reported my son and daughter-in-law's conversation to my husband and the restaurant staff, and we decided to carry out a plan. The wife of the proprietor of the steakhouse gave us the final confirmation, and my husband and I nodded firmly.
"No problem. If you can cooperate, we'd be very grateful."
And so, our retaliation against our eldest son and his wife began. My name is Kenya Robertson. My husband Edward and I are an 80-year-old couple enjoying our leisurely lives and retirement. We both enjoy walking, our common hobby. Sometimes I spend the day alone while my husband enjoys painting with friends or chatting with the proprietor of my favorite cafe. Our time was relaxed and carefree. We have a son. His name is Osmond. He must be around 50 now. He's happily married to Nikita, and they live in harmony. His wife is a homemaker, and they didn't have children.
"If we have kids, we'll lose our time together. I still want to enjoy my leisurely time with her."
Saying this, the son embraced his wife's shoulders. He was completely smitten with her, as if she were his destined partner. At first, we found their affection endearing, and even understood their desire for time together. But then, my husband and I froze at the daughter-in-law's next words.
"Why not use adoption if we want a child?" "I don't want to endure the pain of childbirth."
I was disillusioned by the daughter-in-law's laughing words. I couldn't understand the son's nerves. Laughing along, these two might not be sane. From that point on, we didn't have a close relationship with the son and his wife. I felt like if I got involved anymore, it might strain our relationship. But the slightly distant way we treated each other worked well, and there was never any friction due to differing values or communication challenges. There were no problems in daily life either, and I thought time would continue to flow peacefully. It was during one of these carefree moments that I almost forgot about the whole incident. The problem arose when I went shopping at the supermarket. I felt several eyes on me, and turning around, I noticed several neighbors looking at me and whispering, "Hello, everyone. Out shopping?" Curious about what was going on, I spoke up, but was met with an awkward greeting. In a word, I was being avoided. It was an attitude so blatant that I could feel it instinctively, and it made me question what was happening. Why? The answer was simple. I had just had tea with those very people yesterday. Who would have thought that something like this would happen so suddenly? I wondered if I had done something wrong and stood frozen in place for a while. Suddenly, a man's angry voice echoed through the store from the checkout.
"What are you going to do to take responsibility? I'm asking you."
The loud yelling man made my shoulders jump, and everyone's gaze turned towards him. The store had been filled with lively conversation just a moment ago, but it now fell silent. An eerie change. The only sounds were the continued shouting of the man and the apologies of the supermarket clerk.
We'll replace it right away. Please wait a moment. I don't want the item, you fool. Don't you get that? Just give me a discount.
I turned towards the register, astonished at the man's absurd words, and then, unable to believe who I saw, I momentarily refused to accept reality. Osmond? To my surprise, the person yelling was my eldest son. As soon as I saw him, I rushed over to him. My eldest son noticed me and turned around, greeting me with a calm smile.
Oh, Mom, out shopping?
Despite his earlier yelling, he showed me a friendly smile. I've always thought of him as kind to family and strict with others, but now it seemed he had lost all common sense. I felt that way. It's not about shopping. What are you doing? Yelling like a fool and complaining.
Huh? What do you mean, fool? There was a bug in the cabbage here. I almost ate it without noticing. Complaining is natural, isn't it?
My son must have realized I wasn't just calling out to him but trying to intervene. He immediately changed his attitude, explaining the situation to me in a hostile, quarrelsome tone. His behavior was so domineering that I was bewildered that this was my real son. What's the big deal about 1 or 2 bugs? You could have had it replaced. Why have you been yelling so loudly? Aren't you embarrassed?
Why do I have to be the one to get angry? It's the supermarket's fault, isn't it? They say they'll replace it, but just looking at that cabbage made me feel nauseous from shock. It's not like replacing it solves anything. The more I tried to stop him, the more my eldest son's words escalated. Contrary to me, who felt so embarrassed that my body trembled under the piercing, painful stares from those around us, my eldest son continued to yell as if he wanted to draw even more attention to himself. It must have been a strategy to make a big fuss and put pressure on the store. If this goes on any further, we might get into trouble with the police. Thinking this, I handed the cabbage to the supermarket clerk for now, also leaving my empty shopping basket, and forcibly dragged my eldest son out of the supermarket. Mom, what are you doing?
What are you doing is my line. Making such a big fuss over 1 cabbage. What's wrong with you? Dragging my eldest son outside was fine, but calming his angry state was virtually impossible. And I, too, was about to explode with anger at how shameful it was that my son had grown up this way. A full-grown adult arguing loudly in front of the supermarket. Naturally, I sensed that the surrounding stares were gathering. But my anger did not subside, and the argument with my eldest son continued. What's the big deal about a bug on the cabbage? It's proof that it's delicious, isn't it?
Are you out of your mind? If so, Mom, you can eat cabbage with bugs on it every day. What's the point of continuing this trivial argument forever?
Whether she sensed the commotion or was waiting in the car, my eldest son's wife appeared from his car. Seeing her, my eldest son and I stopped our argument, and he hurried over to her, looking very disheveled.
I'm sorry, Nikita. Was I late?
This was the first time I felt repulsed by my irresolute eldest son, who was attracted to his wife. Until now, I hadn't thought anything of it, but my opinion of my eldest son plummeted all at once because of his earlier behavior. You're more than late. Did you get the money properly? For some reason, my eldest son's wife was intimidating. I felt a discomfort I hadn't noticed when I met her before.
No, Mom interfered, so...
Huh? Don't tell me you missed getting it. She looked down on my eldest son as if he were a servant, and her tone was rough. I was at a loss for words at her actions, which were unthinkable for a woman.
I'm sorry. I'll go now and try again.
We don't need it. How long are you planning to make us wait?
I'm sorry.
Against his harsh wife, my eldest son looked as small as a cat whose neck was grasped. I couldn't find the words to speak. Staring at the two of them in a dazed manner, the wife turned her gaze to me. Mother-in-law, it's been a while.
It seems you've been meddling unnecessarily.
Her tone was cold as she spoke to me, and I felt a sense of irritation in her words. Unable to understand what she meant, I instinctively asked her again. This seemed to further irritate her, and she turned a cold, disdainful gaze at me, looking down on me.
Next time, if you could please not interfere with what we're doing, that would be good.
Inconvenient? Could that complaint be from that child earlier? As I was about to finish, I felt the stifling pressure from my eldest son's wife, forcing me to stop speaking. I felt a terror as though I was being stared down by a wild beast, and I choked on my words.
I told you, didn't I? Never interfere. I won't be responsible for what happens later.
With those threatening words, she took my eldest son, who had bowed his head slightly, and left the scene. Left behind, I could only stand alone in the parking lot watching my eldest son's car leave. Could it be those kids made that complaint on purpose? As they sped away, I reflected on the last conversation I had with my eldest son's wife. It's not a trivial matter. Livelihoods are at stake. Could it mean they are purposely complaining to swindle money? And the way she spoke and her attitude. What was she really? My thoughts were interrupted when I found out the answer the next day. The next day after the quarrel with my eldest son and his wife, a good neighbor came to visit our house. She was quite frantic. What's wrong? So panicky?
Robertson, it's terrible. Your daughter-in-law got into a fight with my husband.
The neighbor was the wife of the proprietor of my favorite cafe. I had been avoiding the neighbors I used to run into at the supermarket, but it seems that my eldest son and his wife showed up there. And just like yesterday, they caused a scene, making the proprietor of my favorite cafe furious. My eldest son filmed the whole scene, and his wife instigated the proprietor of my favorite cafe, creating a hostile atmosphere. I hurriedly called my husband, and together with the neighbor's wife, we headed to her store.
You brought Robertson here.
Oh, the Robertson brothers. What's going on with your son and his wife?
They're wrecking the place and causing trouble.
As we had a relationship with the proprietor of my favorite cafe, we apologized first and foremost. I am truly sorry. We will take them back right away.
Here you are again.
Next to her, my eldest son clicked his tongue and his wife let out words of annoyance. I felt anger rising, but now the most important thing was to calm the situation.
You're a part of the family with mother-in-law, aren't you? It's rude to mother-in-law.
Even in this situation, the proprietor of my favorite cafe was thinking of us. I was touched by this, but it seemed to irritate my daughter-in-law.
I married Osmond and I don't care about anything else. More importantly, how dare you serve such awful food to your customers? What? You're still talking back? You?
My husband restrained the proprietor of my favorite cafe as he was about to lash out, and he deeply apologized on the spot.
We're truly sorry. We will come back to apologize for this mistaken behavior. Other customers are here. Please calm down for now.
My husband conveyed the words of apology with a sincere attitude. Seeing this, the blood in the proprietor of my favorite cafe's face subsided, and for now, he told us to take my eldest son and his wife back without paying. Then, my husband and I silently took them home and led them to the living room. No sooner had the eldest daughter-in-law sat on the couch than she sighed wearily. The eldest son, seeing her like this, seemed flustered and eager to please her.
Do you even realize what you've done?
It was her husband who spoke these words, his face expressionless but his tone tinged with anger. Even I, who have been married to him for many years, had never seen him like this before. He looked so frightening that I shivered involuntarily.
What do you mean? I just complained about the taste and I simply told them I didn't want to pay for such horrible food.
But the daughter-in-law showed no signs of being intimidated. On the contrary, she glared back, insisting she was right.
What you two are doing is a gross violation of common decency. The restaurant is run by our dear friends who have always been there for us.
So what? It has nothing to do with us.
The husband's anger towards his unresponsive daughter-in-law continued to grow. I knew it wasn't right to give in to anger. With that thought, I intervened in their conversation. Nikita, you had our son do the same thing at the supermarket yesterday, didn't you? Are you deliberately making complaints to save money? I voiced my suspicion. Whether it was yesterday or today, what they were doing was clearly out of line. They were harassing people to get something for free. There seemed to be no other explanation for their excessive behavior. Upon hearing this, the daughter-in-law burst into laughter. So much so that tears streamed down her face. My husband and I were taken aback.
Mother-in-law, you're smarter than I thought. Who wouldn't want to eat cheaper if they could?
Even though her scheme had been uncovered, she kept laughing as if there was nothing wrong. She's insane. I couldn't help but think that. And my husband and I were left speechless.
Eating food without trying to save money is just silly. If there's a way to make it cheaper, why doesn't everyone do it? I just don't understand.
You are in your right mind, aren't you? Don't you realize this is a crime?
Crime? Crime, you say? But people rarely call the police because they don't want to ruin their reputation. Most of the time, they give in to our demands to settle things peacefully.
You're crazy. Your way of thinking is not sane.
Even my normally silent husband was taken aback by her words. And yet, she continued speaking, almost as if mocking him.
Yes, maybe I am crazy, but I've been involved in shady activities since I was young, so it doesn't bother me anymore.
At this point, I was revealed that she had been a female leader of an outlaw motorcycle gang. She began to tell her life story.
I grew up in an institution without knowing my parents. Before I knew it, I was part of a criminal organization. This lifestyle was normal for me, so I never thought it was wrong.
She spoke nonchalantly and the eldest son seemed to adore her as if worshipping her.
I love strong-willed women like Nikita. I'll do anything Nikita wants.
Osmond, you... The eldest son speaks in despair, captivated by daughter-in-law. He feels utterly regretful, unable to shake off the shame that his child has grown into such an adult.
So if you persist any further, even if you're my mother-in-law and her allies, I won't hesitate. This is my final warning. Understand?
With those words, my eldest son's wife stood up and he followed her out the door. I tried to stop them, insisting the conversation wasn't over, but my words didn't reach them. My husband and I stood dumbfounded, watching their backs as they left. After that, we tried to contact our eldest son and his wife by phone and visiting their house, but they were coldly dismissed and ignored. Our calls were blocked and we found ourselves alienated from them. From that moment, people in our small town started looking at us differently. Rumors spread quickly here, and being ignored became the norm. If I saw people whispering on the street, I would feel they were talking about me, and I felt cornered. I also went to apologize to the cafe we had troubled, but was asked not to come while we were still associated with our son and his wife, and I was driven out. That night, I was overwhelmed by regret and cried myself to sleep. I sobbed quietly, feeling so wretched that I wished I could disappear. My mental health declined and I was bedridden for days. I was afraid to go out, and my husband took care of all the household chores. Then one day, my husband suggested we go out to change our mood. The proprietor of the steakhouse run by my husband's friend says,
"Please bring your wife with you."
The proprietor of the steakhouse run by my husband's friend is an exclusive club. My husband, who had shared our situation, received an invitation from them. "You've been feeling down. It must be hard. Let's eat something delicious and cheer up." His gentle touch on my back was so loving. I was reminded once again how glad I was to have married him, and I accepted his dinner invitation. I had barely eaten over the past few days and my face was gaunt. I tried to cover it with makeup, but my husband saw through it and told me not to force a smile. With a sense of resignation, we headed to the restaurant. As soon as we arrived, the proprietor of the steakhouse and his wife welcomed us.
"Welcome. We've been expecting you."
"It's been a while. Thank you for taking care of us today."
Madam, please relax. Our young staff makes an exquisite steak dinner.
The gentle demeanor of the proprietor's wife and the robust presence of the proprietor of the steakhouse were reassuring. I smiled weakly and nodded at their words, noticing my frailty. The wife took my hand and guided me through the immaculately cleaned restaurant, filled with cleanliness.
"Welcome. We've been waiting for you."
The one who greeted us with those words was the head chef of the steakhouse. His energy seemed to lift my downtrodden spirit, and I felt almost overwhelmed by his zeal.
"Today I'm going to put extra effort into making a delicious steak for you."
The cuisine at the steakhouse is truly exquisite. Please make yourself at home and enjoy.
The person who greeted us with a smile was the female waitstaff at the steakhouse. Her gentle smile healed my heart, and the smile naturally returned to my face. As I was being treated to a delicious steak, I almost forgot about my eldest son and his wife when,
Hey, how are we going to scam money today?
while on my way to the restroom, I heard a familiar voice from a private room.
It's Dad's friend's restaurant, right? It might be risky here. What are you scared of? This place is no different from the other. Well, yeah, but... Since when did you become such a lame man?
When I see a man without guts, it makes me sick. From the way they spoke and their voice tone, I immediately knew it was my eldest son and his wife in that room. How did they get into this restaurant? As I reached to open the door to the room to ask them, I felt the blood drain from my face as I overheard their conversation. And then, I nearly collapsed on the spot.
Ma'am, are you feeling ill?
The head chef of the steakhouse was there to describe the food. I didn't have the time to explain the situation, and I just told him that I wanted to get back to my room. But I was on the verge of collapsing, and walking properly was difficult. Upon telling him this, the head chef of the steakhouse reluctantly made a request.
I'm sorry. It might not be appropriate since you're a lady, but...
Saying it was an emergency, he picked me up and carried me to my room. When he hurriedly brought me to the room, my husband, the wife, and the proprietor of the steakhouse were all there. The wife rushed to my side, surprised and breathless, as the head chef of the steakhouse appeared with me. The head chef of the steakhouse sat me down in a chair and entered the room, ensuring that no one else would overhear.
What happened? Are you okay?
I'm fine. But
It's a disaster. Osmond and the others.
Osmond and the others? What's going on?
My husband, seeing my pale face, calmly offered me a cup of tea. After sipping the tea and taking a deep breath to calm my heart, I explained the conversation I had overheard earlier.
Come to think of it, a couple by the name of Robertson did come to the restaurant today. What?
I recalled that we had brought Osmond and the others to this restaurant when they got married. At that time, the proprietor of the steakhouse had made a membership card for them since they were our children.
So that's how they were able to dine here. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Why are you apologizing, proprietor of the steakhouse? We are the ones who should be sorry.
More importantly, what should we do? It won't be good if they cause a scene in the restaurant.
As everyone was racking their brains over the situation, the head chef of the steakhouse made a suggestion.
How about this?
We couldn't help but feel hesitant upon hearing his suggestion. But that would mean we'd be putting the head chef of the steakhouse in a difficult position.
Don't worry about it. If I can help you ladies, this is a simple thing to do.
The head chef of the steakhouse laughed manly with a gah-ha-ha, and both my husband and I couldn't help but smile back, lowering our brows.
But if you do this, you won't be able to see your son and daughter-in-law for a while.
With a stern look in her eyes, the wife made sure we were committed to our decision. My husband and I looked at each other and nodded slightly.
We don't mind. If you can help, we would like to ask for your assistance. Are you sure about this? Yes. We can't stop our children on our own. Please, we need your help.
When the proprietor of the steakhouse confirmed again, my husband and I both thanked him politely, and so our counterattack against our eldest son and his wife began.
Hey, call the manager!
As expected, the eldest son's wife started screaming in the restaurant, and customers from private rooms began to peek out, wondering what was happening.
I am the head chef of the steakhouse, but
The head chef of the steakhouse rushed over and asked the eldest son and his wife what was wrong.
There was a hair in the soup. How are you going to make up for this rudeness? We've paid good money, so take responsibility.
As always, the eldest son's wife started to complain. The other customers began to murmur, and worried voices could be heard from the staff.
a hair, you say?
But the head chef of the steakhouse did not waver and responded firmly. Upon inspecting the soup with the hair, he seemed to notice something strange.
This hair doesn't belong to any of our employees.
The head chef's cool analysis made the eldest son and his wife look at him in shock. The words piqued the interest of the other customers, and everyone in the restaurant focused on the exchange between the eldest son and his wife and the head chef of the steakhouse.
What basis do you have for saying that?
We don't have any staff with dyed hair, and we don't have any female staff with such long hair.
What did you say?
The eldest son's wife was taken aback by the head chef's calm observation, but now the eldest son began to complain, following his wife.
Are you accusing us, the customers? Of course not. But if this was intentionally put in by the customer, that would be a serious problem, wouldn't it?
Prove that we put it there before you talk like that. If the evidence is found, may I then speak so boldly?
The wife, who had been listening, now stepped forward, followed by the appearance of the proprietor of the steakhouse. The unwavering attitude of everyone made the eldest son and his wife look around in bewilderment.
What you are doing is a crime, you know. It would be wise to know your place before making a bigger fuss, don't you think?
What's your problem? Is this how you treat customers at an upscale restaurant?
You're not customers or anything else for that matter.
The eldest son's couple, refusing to back down, now faced a verbal volley from my husband. Hearing a familiar voice, the two of them turned towards my husband and me, their faces reflecting confusion.
You again? Why are you here?
That's what we should be saying.
This is our dear friend's restaurant. Stop embarrassing yourselves with this disgraceful behavior.
Disgraceful behavior? There was hair in our food. This is a legitimate complaint, and it's absurd for you to criticize us for it. We know that you deliberately put the hair in there.
As I said this, I pointed to the ceiling. There was a black circular device mounted there.
What's that supposed to be?
Don't you know? That's a security camera.
So what about it?
I looked down on the ignorant eldest daughter-in-law, and she openly showed her anger. She glared at me, displaying a defiant attitude, yet still seemed clueless about the camera. The eldest son was the first to understand the situation.
Hey, is that...
What? Why are you looking so pale all of a sudden?
Husband seemed to have figured out what it means that there's a security camera.
So? What?
The eldest daughter-in-law's disgust was palpable in the frustrating exchange. Seeing is believing. My husband, thinking it would be faster to show than tell, opened the room door and pointed to the ceiling. There, a security camera had been installed.
That camera is the type that can view in all directions. 360 degrees, right?
Even the eldest daughter-in-law seemed to get it now, her mouth gaping like a goldfish. Her face gradually turned pale.
You can get that hair DNA tested or whatever you like. We're prepared to fight this to the very end.
The proprietor of the steakhouse started threatening the two with a broad smile on his face. Then, the sound of sirens came from outside the restaurant.
What?
Ah, looks like your ride's here.
Our ride? What are you talking about?
The eldest daughter-in-law, her face pale, responded to my words. I spoke coldly, with a full-faced smile. It's time for us to part ways for now.
What do you mean?
A police officer appeared in front of the bewildered couple. He began to surround them, asking for details.
Are you the ones who interfered with this business and are trying to push extortion?
Business interference? What? These people were trying to make false claims at this restaurant, hoping to get a free meal. I interrupted the eldest son's attempt at an excuse, explaining the situation to the police officer. When the eldest son and his wife heard this, they resisted. However, the police officer warned them.
If you say anything more, you'll only make your crime worse.
They instantly calmed down.
At any rate, we'll hear the details at the station. Shall we go together?
We didn't do anything wrong. Give it up. I've already explained the situation to the police officers. Everything you tried to do to frame the shop with your false testimony. You'll also tell them about all the dirty tricks you've pulled up until now. They'll hear everything.
That's right. We'll listen to your story for as long as it takes. Shall we go?
The smiling face of the police officer seemed terrifying even as he smiled. Even the hot-tempered daughter-in-law had no choice but to calm down.
We'll take them now.
Thank you very much. My husband and I thanked the police officer, who gave a slight bow, and when we saw the eldest son and his wife being taken away, a big round of applause erupted inside the restaurant.
That was awesome! Nice performance, head chef of the steakhouse.
I thought we were going to get caught and I panicked. My husband and I could only express our gratitude for the warmth of the regular customers, laughing as they spoke. Head chef of the steakhouse. The wife. The proprietor of the steakhouse. Thank you very much.
No, if it means that the Robertson couple can rest easy, we're more than happy. But it really did turn out just like the head chef of the steakhouse said. I can usually guess what that type of person will do.
I and my husband could only look up in admiration at the head chef of the steakhouse, laughing as he spoke. At that time, the head chef had proposed a plan to provoke the eldest son and his wife.
Our employee has brown hair, and while the camera is a surveillance camera, it doesn't see everything. I was worried about what would happen if they knew. We were leaving it to chance, but I'm glad we were able to handle it.
All thanks to the wife, the proprietor of the steakhouse, and everyone's cooperation. Thank you very much. We were all greeted with warm voices inside the restaurant. The staff explained the situation to the customers, and they all sided with us. If something had happened and the eldest son and his wife had started rampaging, everyone would have acted like actors to help us.
Come on, let's resume our enjoyable meal. Today, we'll provide a service from the shop.
Everyone rejoiced at the thoughtful consideration of the proprietor of the steakhouse, and we all had a great time. After that, the eldest son and his wife were sued by the restaurant and faced a large amount of compensation. It also went to court, and they were likely to receive a prison sentence. Furthermore, it was revealed that they had been fighting with the proprietor of my favorite cafe and had posted a video on social media. They were also sued from that side, and their bad reputation spread so that no one in the town didn't know about the eldest son and his wife. Naturally, it became difficult for them to live in the town, and they had to leave as if fleeing. My husband and I thought about what we could do to repay the proprietor of the steakhouse, and as a result of exploring various options, we decided to promote the two eateries using social media. We got help from a web-savvy acquaintance and both places thrived thanks to our efforts. We managed to rebuild a good relationship with our neighbors, and now we can once again go for tea as a couple. After cutting ties with our eldest son and his wife, my husband and I are now over 80 years old, living healthily. We're so happy every day that we don't even have any interest in what has become of our eldest son and his wife. This incident made us painfully aware, once again, that seeking easy gains will be punished.
My husband Curtis looked at me and snapped. A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it. It seemed like he wasn't worried at all. It's because you pushed her too hard, Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he declared, "I'll go buy something to drink," and left the room. After a while, Curtis came back looking very anxious. "You have only a year left to live," he said solemnly. "What?" I was surprised, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of. "No, I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that." I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly burst into laughter. Puffed. Ha ha ha. Wondering what was going on, we both looked at Ashley. Then she turned to Curtis and dropped a bombshell. "What are you talking about? Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom?" The air froze. "Dad, we know everything." "Hey, Stella, isn't breakfast ready yet?" As usual, Curtis called out to me. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "It'll be ready soon," I answered while setting up the corn soup and bread on the table. "I told you I have a meeting this morning. I have preparations to make. Hurry up." I placed the omelet on a plate in front of Curtis, who started eating without a prayer. After all, I was just preparing everything as usual. It was he who overslept. Suppressing my thoughts, I started doing the laundry. Once Curtis hurried out, I finally took a breath of relief. The morning news show started, and I took my breakfast to the lively sound of the TV. As a housewife, I spent my days like this, taking care of Curtis. After 25 years of marriage, with a lot of time spent alone at home, I've been thinking about picking up a hobby, but my shy nature always gets in the way, preventing me from taking the first step. Every day, I prepare breakfast for Curtis, do the laundry, clean, shop. I was getting bored with the repetition of the same days. I've thought about going to work, but I've been frail since I was young, and after giving birth to our daughter Ashley, I became even more prone to illness, so that was not an option. Will my life just end without anything changing? As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang. The sound of the front door unlocking was heard, and Ashley entered. "Mom, are you here?" she said, opening the door to the living room. "Welcome back." Ashley sometimes comes back like this to check on me. When I'm not feeling well, she even helps with the housework. She's such a capable daughter. "How are you feeling?" "I've been doing quite well recently." Ashley looked relieved to see my face, smiling gently. "That's good to hear. Then, how about we go out for lunch? You must be bored, right?" she suggested. We went to a restaurant near where Ashley works and talked about her recent life over the meal. These moments were a happy time for me, and also a break from the monotony of my daily life. After finishing our grocery shopping for dinner and returning home, Ashley set down the bags she was carrying and quickly went back to her own place. When I asked if she didn't want to see Curtis, "Dad's probably fine," she simply replied. Indeed, Curtis, at 48, still looked young for his age. He would work out at the gym after work, and lately, he even started caring about his looks, keeping his body fit and his skin lively. He always had high self-esteem, saying, "I don't want to become someone who gives up just because they're getting older." Compared to Curtis, I feel like an old woman, overshadowed by him and treated coldly. After Ashley left, a flyer on the table caught my eye. It was something that had been put in the mailbox. The flyer featured a beautiful woman. It seemed to be for a yoga class being held nearby. Taught by an active model, offering reasonable prices for people of all ages. I wonder if I could manage yoga, given my frail health. But I found myself making excuses, and tucked the flyer away between the pages of a newspaper. Looking at the clock, it was almost 5 p.m. I must start preparing dinner soon. If Curtis comes home and dinner isn't ready, he'll yell at me again. Since he was in a bad mood from the morning, I planned to make his favorite dishes. And so, I found myself preparing dinner for Curtis again, as usual. Around 7 p.m., Curtis came home. I immediately started preparing the shower. Curtis prefers to shower before dinner. While waiting for the shower to be ready, Curtis was drinking a can of beer and reading the newspaper in the living room. "Wow! Isn't she a beauty?" I was startled by his sudden outburst, only to realize he was looking at the yoga class flyer I had tucked in. Huh. A model and yoga instructor, huh. It's close to our house too. "Hey, why don't you give it a try?" he said, looking at me with a sarcastic tone. An old woman like me going there would just be a nuisance. I brushed it off lightly, but he sighed. "You always say that. Try to take care of your body a little." It seemed he was also tired of my negative thinking. "You used to be good in your younger days, but you're becoming more of an old woman day by day." He left those words behind and headed to the bathroom. When did I start to feel so miserable? It had become so routine that I seemed to have become numb to it. But even so, I can't go back to my younger days. I knew all too well that the reason I never took action was none other than myself. Envious of the radiant smile of the woman on the yoga class flyer, I felt like I was living in a world far removed from blaming someone or something else. On his next day off, Curtis left with the yoga class flyer. Are men allowed to go there too? It was a class held at a young woman's home. Wondering if that was really okay, I asked. It says here people of all ages and genders. So it should be fine. I'm just going to observe. If it's not okay, I'll come right back. He left the house cheerfully, leaving me behind. I wish he had taken me with him. Even though I had chosen not to go, I found myself blaming others again. Fed up with myself, I decided to go for a walk for a change of scenery. I wondered if I could catch a glimpse of what the yoga class was like, even if from outside. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Perfect for a walk. I walked at my own pace. Eventually, I reached the neighboring town where the yoga class was. I didn't remember the address from the flyer, but I had a rough map in my head. And so, I walked looking for the yoga studio sign. Yoga. Yoga. Then I realized. There were no signs for a yoga studio around here. I can't tell where it is. Just as I was about to give up and go back, I heard a familiar laugh. Turning the corner towards the sound, I saw a man and a woman I recognized, sitting at a garden table, enjoying tea. It was unmistakable. Curtis and the yoga class instructor. Not wanting Curtis to notice me, I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but they seemed to be having a great time. Despite being my husband, I was impressed that he didn't seem out of place even next to a young woman. Suddenly, I felt miserably shabby and pathetic. Unable to stay still, I quickly returned the way I came. Why do I always end up like this? All the way home, I kept blaming myself. It wasn't just about my deteriorated appearance. Above all, I needed to do something about this self-deprecating personality. I resolved to change. In the evening, as I was preparing dinner, Curtis came home in a particularly good mood. How was the yoga class? My heart raced, wondering if he knew I had seen him having a good time. Yeah, it was fun. The teacher was around Ashley's age, but she had proper qualifications as an instructor and seemed very competent. So she was that young. I wondered what kind of conversations they had, what made them enjoy their time so much. I became a bit curious. Maybe I should try yoga too. I murmured to myself then. No, that would be impossible for you. Curtis looked me up and down exaggeratedly before laughing. There were a few others there, but none like an old woman like you. You'd just embarrass yourself. Hearing that, I got angry. I was jealous of the yoga instructor, but I had been trying to think more positively. Seeing my expression, "If you're so angry, you should have done something about it sooner," he said dismissively before disappearing into the bathroom. I thought about attending on a weekday when Curtis wouldn't know, but I was sure they'd identify us as a couple based on our last name or address. If Curtis found out, he'd surely berate me. So, despite my resolve earlier in the day, I became gloomy and secluded myself. 3 months had passed since Curtis started attending the yoga class. He went there on his days off, not just for yoga, but it seemed he was also helping with minor DIY for home decor and other small errands. Isn't that something you shouldn't have to help with? I brought it up to Curtis, concerned, but he snapped at me. A girl around Ashley's age is in trouble, and you won't let me help her? Or do you think there's something shady going on? Ridiculous. Even though he's not the kind to help around the house even when I'm feeling unwell. It was unbearable to feel like he valued the instructor more than me. But I couldn't neglect my household duties. I focused more on housework, and Curtis complained about me even more. Ashley, who occasionally came to help, said to Curtis, "Dad, you're being too harsh on Mom." But he dismissed her. That's Stella's job. If you've moved out, don't interfere. Ashley, perhaps fed up with Curtis, started coming back when he wasn't around. Then one day, I finally fell ill and collapsed. Luckily, Ashley was coming home that day and took me to the hospital. Ashley was shocked to find me curled up in the kitchen, thinking her heart would stop. She even contacted my parents, who live nearby, and I was surprised to see them visit me in the hospital bed after the examination. I couldn't help it. "You're already frail," Ashley said, looking down. Who could blame her for worrying? "Thank you for worrying about me." After explaining the examination results to Ashley and my parents, they left the room, relieved. I was diagnosed with a gastric ulcer. After seeing my parents off, Ashley came back to the room to vent. I contacted Dad too. He's late, isn't he? I knew Curtis wouldn't leave work early to rush over for me. But it still felt lonely. I'll come again tomorrow. You'll need a change of clothes, right? Ashley couldn't bear to leave me looking so forlorn. I was grateful to have raised such a kind daughter. That was my only pride. I'll contact Dad again. See you tomorrow. Ashley left, but Curtis didn't come to the hospital room that day. The next day, Ashley brought me the things I needed for my hospital stay. Looking somewhat guilty, Curtis was standing behind her. As soon as he saw me, he sneered. A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it. He seemed not to be worried at all. You've been pushing her too hard. Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he announced, "I'll go buy something to drink," and left the room. Really, I can't believe him, of all people. Ashley seemed thoroughly disgusted. I thought he might just leave, but surprisingly, he came back quickly and very anxious. "You have only a year left to live," Curtis said, looking serious. It seemed it was no joke. What? I was shocked, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of. "I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that." I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly started laughing. Pfft. Ha ha ha. Wondering what was going on, the two of us looked at Ashley. Then Ashley turned to Curtis and said something shocking. "What are you talking about? Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom?" The atmosphere froze. "Stella, are you okay? I came to check on you." Cutting through the tension, my parents arrived. "Grandma, Grandpa, I was just about to talk about everything." "So, we're doing it now." Dad was silent, but his glare kept Curtis from running away. "Dad, we know everything." Ashley began to tell everything. It was about a month after Curtis started going to the yoga class. On her way home from our house, Ashley witnessed something unbelievable. That day, I had been telling Ashley about the yoga class. I reconsidered wanting to go myself and asked Ashley to check it out for me. I asked her to go and ask if it was really a kind of place that would make me feel out of place, like Curtis said. I could have gone myself, but I was scared. "Sure, I can even check it out on my way home today." Ashley agreed cheerfully and went to the yoga class. When Ashley got close to the studio, she saw someone leaving the entrance. She quickly hid around the corner to see it was apparently Curtis and the instructor. Curtis was supposed to be at work that day, but Ashley couldn't have mistaken her own father. Feeling something was off, Ashley stayed hidden and watched. After a while of conversation, Curtis and the woman, after checking their surroundings, leaned in and kissed. Ashley was shocked and couldn't suppress her feelings of contempt after seeing her father like that. That's why she started coming home only when Curtis wasn't there. After watching Curtis leave, Ashley immediately contacted me. "Mom, you'd better stay away from there." Ashley, usually so positive, saying something like that made me ask what was wrong, but she wouldn't say. "I just feel like you and that instructor wouldn't get along." Looking back, it must have been Ashley's kindness trying not to alarm me. Unaware, I regretted missing another chance to go to the yoga class, but a few days later, while walking near the studio again, I spotted a suspicious woman hiding by a fence, seemingly trying to peek inside. How disturbing. Approaching, I realized it was Ashley. What was she doing? She hadn't noticed me approaching. Not wanting to startle her, I stopped and called her mobile, hoping it was someone else, but knowing it was Ashley. My wish shattered when she noticed the call from me and walked away from the studio to answer. "Hello, Ashley? What are you doing there?" I asked, sighing. Surprised, Ashley looked around and saw me. And when she saw me in the distance, "I'm coming over." She ended the call and hurried to me. I thought there was some suspicious person. Seeing my disapproving face, she looked awkward. "So, what were you doing?" Staring back at me, she said. "We'll stand out here. Let's talk somewhere else." Deciding something, she began walking. "We can go to our house since Curtis won't be back yet." Feeling the seriousness, we headed home. Upon arriving home, I made some tea. After taking a moment to relax, I once again asked Ashley, "So, what were you doing there?" "That's the yoga studio Curtis attends, right?" I had previously asked her to scout the place for me, to see what the atmosphere was like, but I thought that matter had been resolved then. Look, before I say anything else, I want you to know that I'm always on your side, no matter what. Starting with that, Ashley told me everything she had seen. On the day she went to observe the yoga studio, she saw Curtis and the instructor coming out looking cozy. They talked intimately and kissed after checking their surroundings. She had been hesitant to tell me, carrying the burden alone to avoid hurting me. I wanted to believe in Dad, too, Ashley said, sipping her tea. She had wanted to believe, so she kept going back to the yoga studio. But contrary to her hopes, Curtis was frequently there, getting along well with the instructor. I was thinking, if I could somehow catch them in the act. If she had proof, she could confront Curtis. She thought by having something over him, she could make him stop treating me badly. I could have been reported for stalking. Discovering her there helped Ashley regain her composure. Yes. Despite hearing about Curtis's affair, I somehow remained calm. I had suspected something beyond just yoga lessons. Curtis denied it, but I lacked the courage to delve further. Hey, Mom. Are we just going to leave things as they are? Ashley looked at me worriedly. If you're up for it, I'm willing to help. I immediately understood what she was hinting at. You're asking if I'm considering divorce? Ashley just nodded without saying a word. What do I want? I asked myself. Honestly, even if I decided to divorce, I wasn't sure I could make it on my own. Having been a housewife all this time, could I really find work? Plus, there were my health concerns. Ashley offered her support, but I couldn't always depend on her. Sensing my deep thought, Ashley reassured me. Even if you decide not to divorce, like I said earlier, I'm always on your side. And left before Curtis came home. Curtis arrived and immediately started complaining about everything as usual. The taste of dinner, the cleanliness of the house, as if he was searching for faults on purpose. Had it not been for the discussion with Ashley earlier, I might have been able to ignore it, but today I couldn't. Hearing the facts from Ashley, everything Curtis did started to disgust me. His voice, being in the same room, everything felt repulsive. That night, after Curtis had gone to sleep, I decided to check his mobile phone in a desperate search for evidence. If there was proof, I would divorce him. I knew it was wrong, but the betrayal started with Curtis. Convincing myself, I checked his phone. But my last hope was shattered. Texts and photos with the instructor, undeniable evidence of his affair, were there. Quietly closing the phone, I went to the living room and lay down on the sofa. I couldn't bear to sleep in the same room. I'll contact Ashley first thing tomorrow. And that's how our plan began. Ashley and I decided to inform my parents first. If the divorce went through, I'd move back to my parents' house. So, it was necessary to explain the situation. Hearing this, my parents were furious. After discussing it as a group, we decided to act at the moment that would make the yoga instructor the happiest. During her surveillance, Ashley found out the instructor apparently had another man. I'll attend the yoga class and gather information. Saying that, Ashley started attending the yoga class and got closer to Curtis's mistress, Hilda. It turned out, just as Ashley had guessed, Hilda was engaged and planning to get married in a year. We'll target that time to demand alimony in the divorce trial. Ashley was oddly enthusiastic, but I felt heavy-hearted. I was anxious about whether I could let Curtis be free for so long and act as if everything was normal. Even now, just living in the same house made me feel sick. My anxiety and the stress of living with Curtis culminated in me developing a gastric ulcer. After telling me all that had happened, honestly, I didn't realize you were under so much stress. I'm sorry. Ashley said. When I was taken to the hospital, she discussed with my parents and decided to change the plan to immediate divorce and claim alimony. Hearing Ashley's story, Curtis just hung his head in silence. The 1 year left you heard about was referring to your mistress Hilda's modeling career. Ashley spoke coldly and formally to Curtis. There's no need for such drastic measures. A normal divorce would suffice. Don't destroy someone's happiness like that. Hearing Curtis prioritize Hilda's happiness over our divorce, I felt an anger like never before. Before Ashley could retort, I confronted Curtis. The one who has been destroying my happiness talks now. Curtis looked at me as if bitten by his own dog. After all the exploitation, not caring about my health, but worrying about another woman, it's disgusting. I had never known I could despise someone so much. It was the first time I realized that I had such feelings inside me. Disgusting, you say? You don't have the right to talk back to me. My negative emotions were overflowing. Ashley tried to intervene, but she seemed bewildered by my anger. Just as I was about to lash out at Curtis again, Mom intervened softly. That's enough, Stella. Her voice was gentle and comforting. A voice I'd known since childhood. I snapped back to reality. After a moment of silence, Mom calmly addressed Curtis. Curtis. I've heard the situation from both Ashley and Stella, but I haven't heard it from you. Curtis looked uncomfortable. If you have any justification, we're listening. Her voice, different from when she scolded me earlier, now carried a chill. I don't have any excuses. Curtis stammered. So, you admit everything is true? Seemingly accepting his fate, Curtis defiantly admitted. Yes. I love Hilda, not Stella. I can't help it. Stella no longer attracts me. That's terrible. Ashley muttered. Terrible, you say? Which is worse? I thought Hilda and I loved each other. But to think, Hilda had another man. It seemed Curtis didn't know about Hilda's fiancé. He trembled, fighting back tears. Do you understand what you're saying? Mom confronted Curtis. After making Stella feel the same way, how dare you feel sorry for yourself only? Curtis looked down, unable to raise his face. Ashley and Mom spoke for me, but I felt nothing for Curtis anymore. I just wanted to be away from him. That was my only wish. With the divorce, we'll also be claiming alimony from you and Hilda, so please leave for today. I told Curtis formally. He stood up weakly, avoided our gazes, and left the hospital room. I cried over the wasted time I had spent with such a man. After being discharged, Ashley and I went to Hilda's yoga studio. It was under the guise of Ashley canceling her membership, but we intended to tell Hilda everything. However, just as we were about to start, Curtis barged in. As we stood dumbfounded, Curtis snatched Hilda's mobile phone from her resisting hands and called her fiancé. In a fit of desperation, Curtis exposed everything to the fiancé and laughed maniacally. After fiddling with Hilda's phone, he threw it at her and left, making deliberate noise with his steps. As Hilda sat on the floor, I told her. That was my husband. Why has it come to this? Hilda looked up at me with surprise, but retorted. That man approached me. If you're his wife, you should at least teach your husband some manners. I'm getting divorced, and we have all the evidence of the affair. Ashley countered with equal fervor. Whatever you think, we will be claiming alimony in the divorce trial. Realizing talking here wouldn't make Hilda admit anything, I decided to leave her house with Ashley. Later, Hilda tried to make excuses to her fiancé, but since Curtis had exposed irrefutable photos and messages, her engagement was called off. Furthermore, Since Hilda's fiancé was the owner of the entertainment agency she belonged to, she ended up being blacklisted from modeling work. Of course, her yoga studio, financed by her fiancé, was closed down soon after. This story was briefly mentioned in gossip magazines, so whether it was entirely true or not is uncertain. However, a for lease sign was definitely posted on the yoga studio's house. Faced with undeniable evidence, Curtis and Hilda couldn't resist and had to comply with the compensation claim. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house for a while, but moved due to harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Both Curtis and Hilda probably thought they could handle the situation at first, but eventually fell apart. Chased by the alimony payments, Curtis lost his money for gym and beauty treatments, his appearance deteriorated, yet he still made advances on young women at work and ended up being sued. He was fired from his job and even in his new job was relegated to a menial position, spending his days alone organizing documents and supplies. He blamed me for his downfall, claiming it was all because I discovered the affair and filed for divorce. As seen in the tabloids, Hilda, after being abandoned by her fiancé, was sued for the yoga studio's business expenses and chased by debt. She blamed me for her misfortune. My parents quickly sold their house and bought a condominium where the four of us could live together. The condominium has excellent security, so we no longer need to fear harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Feeling it pathetic to rely solely on Ashley's income and my parents' pensions, I learned to use a computer from Ashley and started working from home. I'm surprised to find I had such a talent. Today, I'm writing a column about life's battles. My life might have been an uneventful housewife's, but this divorce saga is sure to attract attention. While adding a bit of color to the story, I type the words. My face is wrapped in a gentle smile.